Assalamu alaikum. I'm Carl Arundel, and you're watching In Focus. Now, according to a number of human rights and United Nations reports, the Chinese government has been engaged for many years in the persecution of the Turkic Muslim peoples in the Xinjiang Uighur Autonomous Region in northwestern China, and has been systematic in its attempts to undermine and destroy the fabric of their Muslim faith. The Uyghurs are a people whose history goes back to 300 BC, although obviously the adoption of the Muslim faith came much later with the Mongol conquest circa 1200 AD. Their population is estimated to be anything between 11 and 20 million. And attempts to assimilate the Uyghurs with the forced migration of millions of Han Chinese into the Uyghur majority areas culminated in a series of race riots, most notably the riots in Urumqi in 2009, which saw as many as 200 Han Chinese killed and the subsequent closure of hundreds, if not thousands, of mosques. The persecution reached new levels, though, over the last few years, with the numbers of Uyghurs, imams, scholars, intellectuals being sent for retraining to internment camps surging to more than 1 million, according to a UN report published at the end of last year. The Chinese government has been accused of arbitrary detention, torture, and the systematic and increasingly pervasive controls on daily life of the Uyghurs in the region. I'm pleased to be joined in the studio by Rahima Mahmut, a Uyghur human rights activist. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to In Focus.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you have said that the persecution against the Uyghurs in the region was there, but relatively muted up until the time of the Tiananmen Square protests in 1989, which was a student-led protest to challenge the one-party system in China, and with demands for democracy, greater accountability, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and so on. Now, the protests which we all watched on the international television screens, and remember that famous photograph of a young person in front of a tank, saw thousands of people shot down, injured, as the state clamped down on those protests. Now, I know you were a student at the time and were involved in those protests, and I think you've said that you noted a systematic change at that time in the level of repression that the state was prepared to use, and one which we now see with the Uyghurs. Can you possibly give us some understanding of your involvement in those protests and what happened to you then?
Yeah, I was comparing that to the time after the Cultural Revolution. Mao died in 1976, and then starting from the 1980s, the relative freedom were given to the people of whole China, not just the Uyghurs. Also, so during that period, Uyghur people enjoyed the religious freedom, cultural freedom. I'm not saying that there was no persecution. The discrimination policies were there still. But 1989, it was a turning point in the Chinese government's policy. Started heavy-handed towards any dissidents, the different voices, and especially the regions like Tibet and also the Uighur region became a very severe target. Going back to that 1989 student movement, I was a student in Dalian University of Technology. I traveled by train 21 hours to join the students students in Beijing. I remember we were about 2,000 students came from Dalian and support the student movement in Beijing. I was there about 2 weeks, and when we heard that repeatedly we were warned that leave the square and the army is going to be in on the 4th of June. So I left on the 2nd of June. And we know that on the 4th of June in the morning, the tank came in, the military, and we know thousands were killed because there were a lot of students missing from various universities. And that is a time that it opened my eyes that how brutal this authority, the Chinese authorities, how can one government can kill the top brain of their own people? So that's what I meant, that it changed my political view, and that is the kind of beginning of my political life, if I say so.
Well, it was 10 years later, in 2000, that you finally left China, and you've been campaigning for the rights, the human rights of the Uyghurs from the UK since then. First of all, I'd like it if you can explain why you left China. Were you forced to leave in the first place and to choose to campaign here in the UK for those rights, and whether or not you can travel safely back to China at any time?
I completed my university in 1992 when I returned to my country from Dalian to Urumqi, what they call it, Xinjiang province, I call East Turkestan. And I found myself so not wanted. I graduated from one of the top 10 university, petrochemical engineering I did. And I'm one of the top students. I couldn't find a job in Urumqi. In the end, I had to go to choose somewhere in a place called Maida or Dushenzi and work at a petrochemical plant there. And from the start of my working life, and I actually witnessed this systematic discrimination, and that we have to endure, we have to suffer. In the plant where I worked, there were about over 3,000 employees. Only over 300 were Uighur and other ethnic minorities. Majority of these workers came from mainland China. We have two different Chinese. There are Chinese who were there for a very long time, and we have very good understanding because the people understand the culture, understand the Uyghur religion. But these people, the newcomers, were very different. They very ignorant, and also because the backing from the Chinese government, there is so much tension all the time between the Uyghurs and the Chinese. And the turning point was in 1997. Later, I changed my job to work at a college, teach chemistry and English. And in winter 1997, I went to my hometown of Rolja during my winter vacation. My son was about a year and a half old. And this Rolja incident, or we call it Rolja massacre, took place 5th of February. I remember it was one of the coldest day, and around 200 young men and women took to the street, demand greater freedom for religion and culture. The reason being, before that, for months, they have been cracking down on religion and arrested many young Uyghur religious clerics. So that was the reason about 200 Uyghur young men and women.
And these were peaceful protests, were they?
Peaceful, very peaceful protests. They had nothing in their hands. They just, not even shouting. They were just had the slogan demanding the equality, greater religious freedom, and also have this tradition, Uyghur tradition of Meshrep is a kind of party that is a very important part of Uyghur tradition. That was banned as well. And people joined in during a lot of people didn't know this protest, and seeing these people and reading after reading the slogan, and they thought, yes, this is right. So by the time they reached the final destination, there were over thousands of people, including some even young children, as young as like 12, 11 years old. And the Chinese government noticed in advance this is happening. And so after the protesters reached the final destination, and they deployed the military, and it surrounded the whole, the protesters, opened fire.
With live ammunition?
Yes, and we believe over 200 people died at the scene, and then the mass arrest started. So for days, they were raiding almost every household, and against photographs that they had taken during the protest, and to just take away anyone who they think they looked like. And during that time, a lot of my relatives, including my sister-in-law's husband, he was arrested about 20 days before the protest, and he was given 12 years imprisonment. And then many executions, about 400 executions. Executions.
So they were sentenced to death for having protested?
Yes, yes. And almost every street, you can find many young men missing just after that
And
protest.
so was that a trigger that decided
That was a trigger that I said to myself, I don't want to raise my son here, we have to do something. And over there is no way you can speak your thoughts, your views. And also the religious persecution actually at that time started. And before I was leaving, I was due to leave my country in 1999. I remember during Ramadan time, all the teachers were told we have to observe, must watch if the students are fasting or if they're going to mosque for Jummah prayers. And if we didn't report, and then we also have the consequences. So that there's actually the religious persecution is not new, but now it comes to something is unimaginable, is beyond anyone's belief. So that was the reason that I decided that to leave the country. So
now, Human Rights Watch have suggested that an intense surveillance system is in operation in the region, including collecting data, including even biometric samples from all those deemed or declared to be Uyghurs and practicing the Muslim faith. Importantly, the surveillance extends to families of anybody who is living overseas and involved in campaigning on this issue. How has your human rights campaigning stance here in the UK impacted on your family that are still in China and your friends in China? Are you able to communicate with them freely, either electronically or by phone? Have they been persecuted due to your activities here in the UK?
Chinese government always is one of the tactics of the Chinese government to control the people, even overseas, is to punish the people who are back home. And since I came to the UK and started openly outspoken about the abuse and the Uyghur sufferings of Uyghurs, and I was always targeted, and I know my phones are monitored, so I was always very, very careful about how I speak to my family. But at least in those days, I could communicate with them. In 2013, I had a cancer, grade 3 cancer, and I invited my sister to come and to look after me. And she wasn't allowed to, she wasn't given the passport to travel. So that is a kind of punishment. You know, if I didn't involve these things, it would be maybe easier for my family to obtain passport and to travel. And in 2017, beginning just the end of the 2016, just before the new year, I tried to call. Suddenly, my phone, no one answering my calls. Nobody was answering my calls. And then after 2 weeks, I started to become nervous. I become nervous. Why? What happened? And it just beginning of January, I remember it was like 3rd or 4th of January after the new year. One day I called my eldest brother repeatedly. His phone was ringing and he wasn't answering. So I said, I have to get hold of someone. And then he answered the phone. And when he said hello, he normally said, Assalamu alaikum. That's the most common way that we communicate. And he said, way. And I said, why no one is answering? I didn't say Assalamu alaikum because before that I heard that people even not allowed to say Assalamu alaikum. And if they even found people from their phone that they wrote Assalamu alaikum, they get arrested. And I thought maybe that is not true. I thought maybe people are just exaggerating. But it is very, very unusual for me to hear my brother not say Assalamu alaikum because he's a very religious man. And then he pretended as if he didn't know me. I said, why everyone not answering my call, brother? He said, they did the right thing. They're doing the right thing. And then the next, he said, please leave us to God's hand, and I leave you to God's hand too.
He was telling you not to get in touch with them.
Yeah. And
I can see that's very upsetting for you.
Yeah, that was last time I spoke to someone from my family. And for the last more than 2 years now, I don't know. I don't know what happened to my family members. I tried indirectly to contact. I asked some people who returned, some Chinese friend, asking them to call to find out, but somehow the phones are not working, or my brother's phone was answered by his son, not my brother. So it has been causing great anxiety and sadness and worry. It's because it's the worst thing that when you don't know, especially when you know that so much terrible things are happening. People who have been safe for all these years and all been taken away, given many long years of prison sentence or suspended death penalty. For example, there are about 4 university presidents, 2 of them. One is from Xinjiang University, Tashpolat Tayyip, and he was given 2 years suspended death penalty. Is a very top school, one of the very well-known scholar. And another one, former president of Xinjiang Medical University, he was also given a suspended death penalty just because of the Uighur, because being Uighur.
Now, last year in August, our newspapers were, and our media was a flourish with headlines from a UN committee report which suggested that up to 1 million Uighur Muslims and other Muslim groups were being detained in internment camps in western Xinjiang region, undergoing what the state declared to be re-education programs. The Chinese authorities have said that the attendance at these centres was voluntary and that the attendees are receiving, to use their words, vocational training and employment training. Do you accept the authorities' description of the nature and purpose of those centres?
I wish that was true, but it is a laughable claim. When you arrest millions, now we believe up to 3 million, because last year, that was end of last year, that was in August. From then we know many people disappeared, many scholars were taken away, and I can give you a long list of teachers, professors, doctors, musicians, singers, people who have any kind of influence in the society or loved by the Uyghurs, who were very proud of being Uyghur. They are all being criminalized. Now they disappeared. And recent report that we are seeing that they're forcing Uyghurs to eat pork and drink alcohol. This has never happened in the past. They ban Ramadan or ban religion for the people who work for the government or the students, but now they're targeting everybody.
Now, I've heard that there's been torture taking place in these internment camps. Is that true?
I have been working with some human rights organizations interviewing these ex-detainees and people who spend time in detention, in a re-education camp and in prison. And the details of the torture that they describe is horrendous. It's unbelievable. It's beyond your imagination. And one a young man that I met only about 3 months ago, he described he was in detention for 3 months. And he said, you know, the worst thing was for a Muslim is you have to strip off every night in front of everyone else. And we were ordered to walk in circle in the view of the camera every single night. And there were about 60 detainees locked up in about 60 square meter space. They cannot sleep, they cannot, the food is horrible. And also there's one thing, he said the police siren. He said when the police siren sounds, we have to jump on top of one another.
Now, you've referred to this as ethnic and cultural genocide. What do you mean by that?
It is ethnic and cultural genocide. When people were targeted simply because they are different, simply because they are Uyghurs, simply because they are other ethnic group, they are not Chinese. Now the policy, the Chinese policy is either you become Chinese, just like us, abandon your religion, abandon your language, your culture, and then you are okay. Otherwise, you go to these camps, what they so-called vocational camps or re-education camps, and detain you indefinitely, torture you until you denounce your religion, your way of life, and you abandon your language. If we don't call this cultural genocide, and I don't know what else you can call, also young children. Now, hundreds, thousands of young children of those detained, the children of those detained, are put in so-called loving heart kindergartens. And these children are going through different, again, from young age, from 2-3 years old, going through indoctrination process. And only 2 days ago, there was a news reported by Radio Free Asia, and this young man who is living in Turkey, and he accidentally saw his son, 4-year-old son, on a video. And it's a kind of propaganda video. It sounds like a teacher or caretaker asking him question, and he was answering in Chinese. And so, what is your name? Abdul Aziz. And what is the name of your fatherland? People's Republic of China. What is your describe the flag, your country flag? 5 stars and on a red flag. So when he left him, I mean, his wife left him in 2016 with his 3 children to go back to visit his family, her own family, and then suddenly they just cut off the whole contact, and he found out his wife was sentenced to 10 years because she lived in Turkey. That was the only crime that she had. And his children, he didn't know what happened to them. And he found out now just at least one boy and is in this one of those so-called loving heart kindergarten and going through a brainwashing campaign. And he was crying and said, my fear is they will make my child become Chinese and maybe they will turn him against me and become my enemy.
Well, it sounds the most unbelievable, tragic set of circumstances, and you must be admired for your perseverance. Rahima Mahmut, it's been a real honour and a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me on Islam Channel.
Thank you very much for having me.